Dejean Talks is a prolific motivational speaker, a poet, an entrepreneur, as well as a business consultant. And he also is a prison reform advocate, using his voice to empower a generation. Since he was about 19 years old, Dejean has been captivating audiences of all sizes and backgrounds with his riveting, painful, and inspiring performances. His life is a story of victory in the face of trials.
You are now listening to The Forefront Radio, where we discuss history, the Bible, the history of the Israelites, science, and other matters. Bring it out. The history of the Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans as it relates to the Bible. Who were you prior to slavery? Who were you prior to colonization? These answers and more can be seen and heard as you listen to The Forefront Radio.
Welcome to the show, Dejean. How are you?
I'm blessed and highly favored, man. Thank you for inquiring. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Can't complain. We really appreciate you joining up on the show. So let's get right into it. Tell us about your childhood growing up and some of the challenges that you faced being detained at such an early age in Cuba.
Where do I start, right? That's a loaded question right there, right?
I know, right?
You led me to what you really want me to talk about as well. Growing up, first of all, I'm from the island of Haiti.
Okay.
I was born in Haiti. When I was born, doctors said that I would never walk. So from the waist down, nothing worked. I got hip issues. I got nothing in between my knees. Like nothing works. I didn't really start walking until I was 3 years old. How I walk is a hilarious story, which we'll get into another time, but that was by the grace of God. And then at 6.5, I was raped by 2 women before I encountered the prison that you're referring to. You're trying to lead me into. And then we faced political warfare. My dad was a military man. He was a soldier, and he was also involved in heavy politics with the administration at that time. And when there was a coup d'etat in Haiti and the president was kicked out the country, and the general that took over the country, he hated my father but was in love with my mother. Classical fairy tale love story.
Definitely.
And then, one night he came and shot up our house with a whole bunch of army men. Bullets was running through the house. My mom was screaming. And then the next morning when we woke up in human blood, it was written on our house, "Get out or die." My dad created a small group of 13 men. They started creating a small-sized capsule boat for us to flee the country. And then we fled the country. And then 3 days later, after being on the ocean, we were captured by the National Guards. This is on the New York Times. You can find this article on the New York Times. I'll share the link in your video later. We were captured on the ocean with our Sharpton on the boat, National Guards. And we were taken to prison in Cuba to be waiting to figure out if we were going to go defined as political asylum or not. I spent 30 days in prison over there. I was in my own cell as a child. My father was taken. And after the 30 days, they came and got us and threatened to deport us back to Haiti. Not just the 13 of us that caught on the boat, but all of the Haitian migrants that they were being held captive, which was about 250 of us. If I recall that article clearly based on how the journalist wrote it, my dad, being who he was, the brute of a man, the vigilante of a man, he stood in front of the ship's deck, in front of the National Guards, and he told them with Bob Marley playing in the background, if you're going to take us back to Haiti, you might as well line us up yourself and shoot us now.
That's a warrior to say that. That is
you understand, right? That's some gangster stuff, right?
Right.
After my dad made those wonderful sentiments of his, well, all arms were drawn on us. All guns that you could possibly think of, fire hoses, because they were afraid of a uproar or coup d'etat, or, because, hey, you got a whole bunch of desperate people running for their lives, and you're talking about you're going to send them back. Well, out of that 250, only 7 of us were actually provided what's called political asylum. In Creole, we call that asile politique. And then they took us to the back of the ship while we watched the other 250 get deported back to Haiti and slaughtered on the ocean, Haiti's beach. Yeah, so at 6.5, I got to see that beautiful war scenery of blood and paint over the ocean's beach. And then I was taken on one of those big old U.S. Army planes and shipped here to the United States. And the story starts from there. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, very thoroughly. And thank you for answering that because it leads up to the next question and going into the United States. You know, on our radio show, we talk about these different things that affect the diaspora all over, including the oppression that we face here in the United States, as well as all the surrounding territories. From what I know of Haiti, because my parents are from Haiti as well, it was the first free Black nation that established itself without any Emancipation Proclamation, without an Abraham Lincoln. We got it by the knuckle. You know what I'm saying? So leading up to our next question, as far as America, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution in America states that we in the diaspora, or Blacks in particular, are free from slavery except in the case of imprisonment. Do you believe, as others, that the prison system as we know it today is modern slavery revives? What are your thoughts?
I'm glad that you're well educated on this matter. It's good that you did your background. So, chapter 13 actually has two portions to it. You have portion 1 or portion A, depending on how you list it, and portion 2 or portion B. Portion 1 of chapter 13 was supposed to liberate us, Black people. That's what was supposed to set us free. You know, when we celebrated our Jubilee, and, you know, when the South didn't want to relinquish their slaves and the North was like, let them go. And the South was like, I don't think so. We got free labor here. I'm not letting nothing go. And after, you know, a couple of back and forth tussles, you know, of the jump rope, the North finally won and the South was able to let us go. Well, they had something up their sleeve. And what they had up their sleeve was, we're going to create what you just indicated, was a clause that allowed them to be able to entrap us again. I use the word entrap because simply it was created for only a specific group of people. So when we talk about the prison complex, the reason why the numbers are so not well balanced, it's more like an 80 to 20 ratio. And that 20 is not just Caucasian, it's everybody else, and 80% Black. It's simply because when they removed the financial benefit of free labor, they had to recreate it. And when you think about free labor, you got to think about like a mule or a horse or a car or a truck. What do those things do when you own them? When you own that property or possession, you brand it, you owned it, and it works and it provides a return, right? When you think about how slavery was created, they used to create a listing for us, like you would create an ad. They would tell you how strong you are, if you were pale skin, dark skin, depending on where you were going to work. They would actually give you a little, you know, branding, a dog chain telling you who you belong, and you were now property of whoever. And they paid taxes. They even had insurance on you. They paid insurance on you, so that if anything happened to you, they got their money back, right? So you were good property. Well, they wanted to get that property back. So this is why when you go into the prison system, the term inmate is the reformulated definition of slave. And then this is why they call you property of the state. You can still pay taxes once you get free, but you still have no rights to vote. You can still pay taxes. You can do all of those things that benefit society without you getting the benefit from society. You don't get a voice, and which is the strongest thing that we can have today, right? First Amendment, freedom of speech. Boy, they want to put a gag around that and refrain that, right? Well, who did they want to do that more than anybody else? The person that they never want to have a voice in this country.
Exactly.
Which was the ones they brought here, not by choice. Plymouth Rock didn't fall on us. You know, we didn't fall on it. It fell on us. You know, we could go Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, whichever one you like. It doesn't really matter. They both fought for the same cause. So yes, prison is the new slave concept. You could read books like the Willie Lynch concept. There's tons of books talking about it, the prison industrial complex. You can read the Miles Monroe Project. I mean, there's tons of things that were reinstate what I'm stating right now, because you have no rights in prison and you work for free. It's not the fact that now you have free labor. Somebody's actually going to pay you to have that free labor. They even innovated. They got the 2.0 version of the slave. What's the 2.0 version of the slave? Slave just worked for free and you made a profit. Now the slave works for free in the prison system, and the taxpayers pay you to keep them in there, which is a double incentive, what we call double taxation, to keep them in there. You're paying $36,000 to $60,000 to keep somebody in there. And who are they making pay to keep them in there? They're making your own brother that looks just like you to keep your brother incarcerated, and then they're getting free labor from it. Man, that's a beautiful business model, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And what's amazing about what you said, we cover some of that on the Forefront Radio. We correlate the history known as the Bible with what we're going through now in today. You mentioned something earlier about how these other nations had possessed us during slavery and they imprisoned us. And this can be found in Zechariah 11, verse 5, where it says,
Right.
whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. When you look at all the things that we face, for example, the migrants that came into Texas and slavery in itself, these people still have a mindset of oppressor and the enslaved, oppressor and the quote unquote inmate, oppressor and whatever terms that they want to derogatory call us, whether it's refugee, immigrant, thug, criminal, all these different terminologies that they use. And that's amazing that you're familiar with this, because as a prison reform advocate, you have the tools necessary to enlighten those that aren't aware of this information, that don't know that we have to overcome these trials that we face as a nation of people. Not only that, but no other nation on the planet fits these prophecies of being enslaved, being scattered into all nations. It's found in the history book known as the Bible. Reading on the verse, it says, Zechariah 11, verse 5, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. Just like when you look at Trayvon Martin, they slaughtered that young man and they held themselves not guilty. And then it says, and they that sell them, weren't we sold in slavery? Yes. It says, they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich. Going into what you just mentioned, how the United States government and other institutions of slavery get rich doublefold, double, like you just said, double taxation on the oppression that we face already in the United States as well as around the world. So I wanted to ask you the question, how were you able, in what ways were you able to overcome these trials? And what goals do you have as a motivational speaker, as a poet, as a prison reform advocate, and an entrepreneur to help our people to overcome all the trials that we face? Because obviously you went through a lot of trials, but you've overcome these things. So how have you overcome these trials?
Okay. I'm going to try to unpack everything that you just asked me, because you asked me quite a bit. So I'm going to do my best to unpack it for you. First off, on the point that you just made in reference, the Bible speaks a lot about slavery and oppression, right? If you understand, the original people were always enslaved on different levels, right? It's amazing how we can always talk about the white on black slavery, but we don't understand that slavery started within us, black on black slavery. We love to wear our unks and represent Egypt and all that stuff, but Egypt was the one that captured the original Hebrews and kept them in slavery for 400 years. Right?
Exactly.
So we
exactly.
We have to understand, where did the oppressors learn to duplicate the process or mimic the processes and market it better than what we've originally done, right? So we have to understand that black on black slavery was existing before there was even white on black slavery. The only thing is the level of severity, right? The level of severity and how recent, right? How recent it was and how that recent applies to our day-to-day lives, because it's only been 400 years or 50 years of freedom plus, right? So we're more attuned to what just happened than what has already been happening. A history that fails to learn itself repeats itself. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a cycle of recidivism. Prison has always been around. It's amazing that you talked about the injustice levels of prison reform or prison in the United States. We have more people in prison in the United States than the whole world combined. The whole world. The United States is defined as the infant of the world. It's the newest baby. I mean, it still has diapers on it. It's still drinking on milk. It hasn't even been around long enough to even have a word, but yet it has more people incarcerated than the whole world combined. It's not because that we have more bad people in this country. It's the way that we create our structure and how the country was already built on and how we want to keep building on that ideology. So it's an ideology that we want to try to maintain, right? We use terms like law and order, which is another form of supremacy, and mindset, right? In regards to your statement about how did I overcome a lot of the situations that I overcame and how the greatest historical book is a foreshadow of everything that we're going to take. When you talk about the book of Thessalonians, you speak about John, you speak the book of Revelations. Maybe you can go back to Genesis and correlate it back to John. The Bible would never fault itself. It's always going to tell you what happened, what will happen, what will happen. The Bible has done a phenomenal job, but the problem with us is we're very forgetful. This is why the Bible is so repetitive, right? It's so repetitive in the same storyline, in the same context, because it seems like every generation we go through the same garbage, right? Because we don't learn. Same old devil, same trick, but same people still keep falling for it. Ain't nothing new under the sun. That's what Solomon said, right? So,
Right.
So when we're looking at it, how did I overcome everything I came? I wish I could give a credit to any knowledge that I have any strength that I had. But then I would take credit away from the one that's giving me the strength, right? And that would be God. My level of whether I knew I had it or not, or the strength that God has already put inside of me, the resilience. He says he's on me from the crown of my head to the sole of my feet. He says, I am marvelously and wonderfully made. He said, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. He told me every day in Ephesians 6, he says that the weapons will form, but they won't prosper. He also told me that I must put on my full armor daily. He also told me in Matthew that if Jesus carried the cross, why would I not carry the cross? I need to carry my cross every day. I was already ready to understand that challenges would arise, but I was also told that I have a victor that's already overcome the trials and tribulations of this world. And because he now resides in me, I now have that victory over everything in this world. He also told me he gave me dominion over everything. Once we start focusing the way that we think at challenges no longer become challenges. It's just become another joyful step towards a resolution that you're trying to achieve anyway. Right. So once we understand the work of the enemies as well, because we love to preach about God, but we don't preach enough about the enemy. You were talking about the book of Ezekiel.
Right.
Ezekiel does a phenomenal job of breaking down who your enemy is. I think he does one of the most detailed, descriptive job of breaking down the enemy. Jesus Christ himself spoke more about the enemy than he spoke about the kingdom of heaven. He spoke more about hell when he preached when he was on earth than he preached about heaven, right? So we have to understand the art of war, understanding the enemy better than understanding self. So when we talk about the prison complex and slavery, we need to understand those mindsets better than we even understand our own feelings and mindsets in order to have a victory. So for me, it's a baseline of faith, right? I don't believe without my faith, me and you would even be dialoguing right now. Because a lot of the things that you probably don't know is I've been shot twice. I've been stabbed twice. I've contemplated suicide. I've been homeless. I ate out of the trash cans. I broke into schools to eat. I broke into the church to try to survive. I've had more guns pointed at my head than I can count. You understand?
Yeah, that's heavy, man. That's heavy.
Yeah, I've lived a life beyond what you can read on paper. You understand what I'm saying? So when people look at the man of God today, typically I'm dressed in a suit and I'm in ties like that. They look at the outcome, but they don't look at the journey. They don't look at the process. So they like the outcome, but they don't want to go through the process. That man that, when God says, he will maintain you the same way he maintained David, I believe that because I have been maintained beyond my level of comprehension. When he says, I will give you peace that surpasses your understanding, Lord knows I don't even understand how I have the peace that I have today or even have the same.
Right, definitely.
Because of everything that I've been exposed to, I am supposed to be crazy and over the top, heavily medicated or thinking about suicide, but I'm not.
Right. Most people that experience some of these things, like you said, most people that experience these things do have that level of either depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. And I'm so happy to hear that you've overcome that, because those type of challenges could literally break people. And what you mentioned as far as faith is important, I see, because faith is combined with your actions. In Revelation 14:12, it says, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So I see what you're saying as far as combining your faith and then the actions that happen after your faith. That's amazing to know.
Let's take it to the scholars of faith, the book of Hebrews. Let's go to Hebrews 11:1. Hebrews 11:1. For what? The substance of faith is the things of hope for, but the evidence of things not seen. So you're hoping in something that hasn't even been revealed to you yet. That's the substance of faith. It's not that, I can see it, so I'm going to take a step across from it. No, you can't see it. It's pitch black. But you're having faith in something that you yet can't see, but you know will manifest. Then you take it to Hebrews 11:6, where it says that for without faith, now this is where nobody wants to understand, for without faith, it is impossible. Wow, that's a big word. It is impossible to please God. For those that come to him must believe that he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Right? It is impossible.
Right, definitely.
Right? The only way to come to know God is through faith in Christ. So you must first repent for your sins and do that through faith. Understand that you can't save yourself through faith, right? So faith and grace goes hand in hand. So we live by grace every day, because me and you don't deserve the favors that we get every day. We don't deserve life. We don't deserve good health, because we whether we think we're good or not, because there is none good. Whatever ideology you have yourself, that's totally up to you. But the reality is we all fall short of the glory of God and we all sin, right? But the benefit of grace and faith, my friend, and a God that loves me when I didn't even know how to love myself. A God that didn't give up on me when at times I told him to take my life. A God that said he saw more in me because he knew what he created in me when everybody around me just only saw the worst in me. You understand what I'm saying? So it's more
definitely
than holding it. It's about, the reason why I love Jesus so much is for the simple fact that he did not just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Because we have enough talkers out here, right? The 12 that was with him, when he looked at them, he said, feed the 5,000. They told him, send them away. He's like, no, it's your responsibility. You feed them. right? And we don't know how to feed people anymore the right stuff. We don't know how to, lead by actions and not by words, because there's enough talk out here. What are we actually doing? I wanted to see you, because faith without works, that's what you were alluding to. Faith without works is dead. Let your walk be your talk, not your talk be your walk. And I'll land there.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I hope this can encourage the listeners to not only speak, like you said, but do. Not only have that faith, but let that faith be that motivational factor to keep you grounded. When you think about the life of the Black Messiah, his goal was to overcome all things on the earth, to establish himself as the King of Kings. We also, as his people, are the of kings that he's talking about. We are the nation of kings and priests talked about in Exodus 19:5 that was supposed to rule the world. So when you read Deuteronomy 28, our ancestors broke the covenant with Moses on Mount Sinai through that disobedience, not following those laws, statutes, and commandments, which is why we suffer from the generational curses that we experience. And you quite briefly talked about some of these negative experiences that you had. And what I like about what you shared today was that the flip end could happen. If we walk through that same spirit and we're obedient to the Creator and walk by faith and not by sight, by keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments and following faith in the Messiah, we can now be the head and not the tail. We can now be rulers on this earth. We can now be overcomers, because that's what it says in the book of Revelation. Those that overcome and keep his works to the end, the same shall rule all these nations.
Let's go back to Moses a little bit. Let's backtrack. I love talking about the Bible, so you screwed, man. So let's go back.
Oh, no, we good.
All right, good. Let's talk about Abraham and Moses. But remember, he also said in the same breath that the first shall be the last, right? And let's reference that. Remember, there's a reason why the first shall be the last, because of our disobedience, right? So let's reference right back to Moses when he's in the mountain and he's praying 40 days and 40 fasts, and he comes down. And what did we do after God done did all of this stuff for us? We go create idols to worship out of gold. Right?
Ooh, now you cooking with oil. Now you cooking with oil, because that's exactly what we do today. Exactly.
All right. So now let's transition to today's society. The first shall be the last. Yes. Right. If we look at today's society, when I'm referring to us as Blacks, so the original Hebrews, whatever you want to call, whatever context you want to call, I don't want to give no context, but let's just say me and you, Blacks, right? This skin tone, right? When you look at us right now, what are we idolizing? Every one of us is chasing the name brands, the idols, the gold. Everything that had taught us from God is the exact same thing we're doing today. And he told us what in the last day what we'll do. There will be a great falling away of the church. He will give us away to a reprobate mind, meaning a selfish idolization mindset, which is what we have in today's society.
Right.
When you look at and all of this stuff, right? We're all chasing titles. We're all chasing money. We're all chasing manna. He said you can serve both manna and God. And we're all chasing the idols. You see all of the jewelry, the name brands, all of these stuff. These are called idolatry, right? It was no different than when Moses walked and he condemned that same mindset that made him. And it was so condemned that he did not allow anybody 20 years and under to go into the promised land, because he didn't want anything taken from old to go into something new, because old wine and new piston cannot be mixed together. And that's a mindset, right? That's a mindset. So he had to completely cut off the head from 40 or 20 and up, so that way he can get a young generation that didn't understand the struggle, that didn't understand that false worship, that didn't understand that, where he can work with them from young. This is why he always talks about the children. Say, hey, do not touch my little kids. Don't touch those, right? Because they're precious gems unto me. So he wants us to also have faith of the kids. When I'm a father, I have boys. When my son looks at the edge of the bed, he jumps. He doesn't think about if dad's going to catch me. He just jumps me like, dad, whether I'm ready or not, that's not his problem. I better catch. And guess what?
Right, definitely.
That's the picture of faith God wants us to have in him. That's the literal picture of faith that we should have in him. And he says in Isaiah, since you like the old scriptures and the old prophets, he said in the book of Isaiah, if my people would just turn back to me, I will heal their land. If we would, that would tie into the revelational verse that you just said earlier. But we must first do what? Turn. But it's the context of the heart. we learn throughout the whole Bible, he's been dealing with the heart. Look how he dealt with David. He's a man after my own heart. David is the biggest sinner walking the face of the earth. But yet God looked at him. He said, he's a man after my own heart, because he's dealing with the content of the heart and not the external things of the man. So we need a cardiologist in today's society to do some really internal work, because we're all dealing with filters.
Yes, definitely.
All of the fake facades of society, but nobody's
need a brain surgeon.
You understand? The Bible tells you what? Renew your mind daily. Let this mind also be in you. So there's a lot. I think we're so focused on the external stuff when we should really be working on the internal stuff, which will impact the external.
Definitely, Dejean. Man, we appreciate you joining on the Forefront Radio. We got to invite you again on another opportunity to speak again. Like, let's do a part 2 and everything. And we really need to chop it up again on that topic, because it's really important for our people that face all these trials of prison, of oppression, of all these different things, to have like-minded individuals that can help them to overcome these trials and keep them on the right track. That's my thought and prayer for all the listeners. So in conclusion, wrapping up, what would be the best way for listeners to get in touch?
Everything is Dejean Talks. I'm sure you guys can see the spelling of my name on this live. So whether you go on Dejeantalks.com, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you go, if you just type in that word Dejean Talks, I promise you, you'll find me. I'll be the first one to pop up. So everything that I'm doing, working on, you'll be able to either catch it on my website, or you catch it on IG or Facebook or any of the social media platforms.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for joining up on the show. We're going to have to schedule another time so we can chop it up again and have part 2 of this dialogue, because I want to dive deep also into what you mentioned earlier in regards to your experience dealing with oppression here in the United States. So tune in, listeners, for part 2. We're going to have a discussion on that at another time when we can schedule it. And I appreciate you for joining on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and thank you for allowing me on your podcast and to meet your guests and your audience. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.